My name is Megan Carter, and I'm 27 years old. 3 days ago, I found out exactly how fast your life can spin out of control because someone you love thought it'll probably be fine was a personality trait. If you'd asked me a year ago to describe my relationship, I would have said it was solid. Not some epic movie-level romance, not tragic either. Just steady in a way that felt earned. My boyfriend, Mark Hayes, and I had been together for 2 years. We met at a local brewery trivia night back in 2023. A crowded patio, terrible lighting, overhopped IPAs. I was wedged at the end of a picnic table, nursing a cider, and seriously considering faking a migraine to leave early when Mark slid into the empty space beside me. Slightly crooked smile baseball cap worn backward, looking like he'd given up on pretending to be an adult for the evening. If the host asks one more question about 80s geography, he muttered, "I'm reporting this place to some kind of boredom hotline." I snorted into my drink before I could stop myself. We started talking about the terrible questions about action movies, about our shared love of tacos, spreadsheets, and complaining about work deadlines. He was charming, quick, and easy to talk to. We moved in together after about 1 year. I had my routines. Meal prep on Sundays, laundry on Thursdays, dishwasher scheduled to run at midnight. He had his late-night gaming with friends, half-finished cups of coffee on every horizontal surface, big grand plans he didn't always follow through on. It balanced. Mostly. Or at least I thought it did. Last Wednesday, my entire illusion of solid started to crack during a marketing strategy meeting. I was in a glass-walled conference room on the 5th floor, one eye on the whiteboard, the other on my laptop screen. My director was droning on about Q4 KPIs when my phone buzzed on the table. Mark. "Hey babe, quick thing. I lent your Camry to Chris. His car is in the shop and he needed to run a few errands. Hope that's okay." My heart did this weird stumble. Chris Nolan was Mark's friend from college. Funny, loud, always just a little bit too much. I'd met him maybe half a dozen times. He seemed nice enough, if a bit reckless, the kind of guy who would jump off a roof into a pool before checking the depth. I stared at the text, all the air seeming to thin out around me. My car wasn't anything fancy. A 2020 blue Toyota Camry with cloth seats and a stubborn Bluetooth connection, but it was mine. I'd saved for the down payment, paid it off early, kept it immaculate. I had a spreadsheet called vehicle maintenance, because of course I did. I typed back under the conference table, jaw tight. Would have appreciated a heads up first. When's he bringing it back? 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Mark, just for the afternoon. I figured it was fine. You're at the office all day anyway. I'll make it up to you, promise. I stared at those words. I figured it was fine, and felt something low-level and unpleasant spark in my chest. Across the table, my coworker was explaining why we needed to pivot the campaign. I nodded at the right moments, but my brain was stuck on my car in someone else's hands without my permission. It wasn't that I was against helping people. I just liked being asked when it was my help being volunteered. The meeting dragged on for another hour. By the time we wrapped, I had about 10 new tasks assigned to me and no further messages from Mark. I grabbed a mediocre sandwich from the break room, answered some emails, and tried to shove the irritation into a box labeled, "Talk to him about boundaries." Later, around 3:15 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Mark. So Chris just called. The car got stolen. My throat went dry. Stolen. I called him immediately, not caring that I was in the hallway outside the conference room and my voice might echo. He answered on the first ring. "Hey, Mark, what do you mean stolen?" I know, I'm freaking out too." He rushed. Chris said he parked it outside the Walmart on 5th Street near the mall, ran in for like 20 minutes, and when he came out, it was gone. He already filed a police report. I pressed my free hand against the cool hallway glass, trying to steady myself. He had my car for a few hours, and it just vanished. "That area has had issues," Mark said. Like that somehow helped. He said there were security cameras. The police are looking into it. I shut my eyes. "Did you seriously lend my car out without even asking me first?" "I was going to text you," he said helplessly. "But you were in meetings, and Chris was literally at the shop already. His mechanic said his transmission's toast. He sounded desperate." K. There it was again. That word, desperate. As if desperation was a free pass to use other people's property. I took a slow breath, forcing my voice flat. "Okay, text me the report number. I'll call the police myself." "Megan. Mark, I have to handle this. We'll talk tonight." There was a beat of silence. "You're mad." "I'm busy," I said, which we both knew was a lie. "We'll talk later." I hung up before my voice could crack. 15 minutes later, an officer from the auto theft division called. His voice had all the enthusiasm of someone on their 50th stolen vehicle report that week. I gave him the VIN, the plate, the make, the model where Chris claimed it had been parked. He told me they'd keep an eye out, that sometimes cars turned up in a few days, and that my insurance company would need the report number. The whole thing felt weirdly distant, like it was happening behind glass. That night, Mark went for the full apology production. When I opened our apartment door around 7, the place smelled like roasted garlic and meat sauce. The tiny dining table was set with candles we usually only used when the power went out. He was at the stove stirring a pot, face flushed with heat and nerves. "Hey," he said, turning toward me with a hopeful, lopsided smile. "I made lasagna, homemade noodles and everything." I dropped my laptop bag onto the couch. "You trying to bribe me with cheese and carbs?" "Absolutely," he said without missing a beat, then softer, "and because I'm sorry." I hung up my coat and walked into the kitchen. "You lent my car to someone without asking Mark." "I know." He put the spoon down and wiped his hands on a towel. "I messed up. I should have texted you first. Chris was panicking and I wanted to help, but that doesn't excuse not checking with you. I'll cover whatever the insurance doesn't. Deductible, rental, anything." "It's not just the money." I leaned against the counter, looking at him. "It's that you decided for me." He flinched at that, eyes dropping to the floor. "You're right." Silence stretched between us, filled by the soft, simmering bubble of sauce and the hum of the fridge. "He said the car was only alone for 20 minutes. I asked finally. "That's what he told me." Mark looked up again. "Walmart on 5th broad daylight. He said some officer already took his statement." "Does Chris know anyone who might want to steal a car?" The question sounded ridiculous even as I said it, but something in my gut felt off. Like walking into a room that looks clean but smells faintly like smoke. Mark shook his head. "He's an idiot sometimes, but he's not a criminal. He just doesn't think." He gave me a rueful smile. "Kind of like me today." I couldn't quite bring myself to smile back. We ate dinner mostly in silence. He kept trying to make small talk about work and a new show he wanted us to watch. I kept thinking about my Camry sitting God knows where keys passed around like it was a rideshare. After we'd done the dishes, Mark wrapped his arms around me from behind, chin resting on my shoulder. "I'm really, really sorry, Meg. It won't happen again." I looked at our reflection in the dark window above the sink. Me tired and tense. Him trying to pretend this was fixable with enough apologies and homemade pasta. "I want to believe you," I said quietly. He squeezed me tighter. "You can." The problem was, I wasn't sure that was true anymore. Not entirely. 2 days later, on Friday afternoon around 3:00 p.m., my phone rang while I was at my desk, halfway through editing a campaign brief that refused to make sense. Unknown number, local area code. "Hello, this is Megan." "Miss Carter, this is Detective Miller with the Auto Theft Division," a man's voice said, gravelly professional. "We've located your vehicle." Relief hit me so fast it almost made me dizzy. I stood up from my chair, heart racing. "You found it. Is it okay?" "It's currently parked on a residential street," he said. "Outside 42 Maple Avenue. Does that address mean anything to you?" "Maple Avenue," I repeated, frowning. "No, I don't think so. Should it?" There was a brief pause on the line, the kind that makes your skin prickle. "The homeowner is a Jessica Vance," he said. "Does that name ring a bell?" My hand tightened around the phone until my knuckles went white. Jessica Vance, Mark's ex-girlfriend, the woman he'd dated for 2 years before we ever met, the one he'd supposedly blocked, deleted, and moved on from long before I came into the picture. "Yeah," I said slowly, my mouth suddenly dry. "I know who that is." "Miss Carter," Detective Miller said, "we're going to need you to come down to the station this afternoon. There's a complication with your vehicle that we need to discuss in person." My stomach dropped. "What kind of complication?" I asked. "It'll be easier to go over everything face to face," he replied. "Can you be here within the hour?" I looked at my half-finished brief, my open Slack messages, the innocuous little succulent on my desk that suddenly felt like part of another life entirely. "Yeah," I said. "I'll be there." And for the first time since this started, I understood that my car being stolen was only the beginning. The police station smelled like burnt coffee and disinfectant. I signed in at the front desk, clipped visitor badge swinging against my chest, and followed a uniformed officer down a hallway lined with faded posters. Everything felt too bright, like the overhead lights had been turned up one notch higher than necessary. Detective Miller was waiting in a small interview room. Rectangular table bolted to the floor, 2 plastic chairs, one-way mirror. He was in his late 40s maybe. Graying hair, tired eyes, dress shirt rolled at the sleeves. He stood when I walked in and offered his hand. "Miss Carter, I'm Detective Miller. Thanks for coming in." I shook his hand, noting the firm, dry grip. "You said you found my car." "We did." He gestured to the chair across from his. "Please have a seat." I sat folding my hands together on the table so he wouldn't see them tremble. He didn't waste time. "As I mentioned on the phone, your vehicle was located outside the residence of a Ms. Jessica Vance." Hearing her name in his calm, official tone made it feel like we were talking about a stranger, not the woman I'd heard about in half-finished stories and late-night confessions. He slid a sheet of paper from a manila folder and turned it toward me. A printed photo. There was my car, my blue Camry parked neatly at the curb like it belonged there. The picture had that washed-out quality security stills always seem to have, but it was unmistakable. "We confirmed the plates and VIN," he said. "No visible damage exterior-wise. However," he pulled another photo out and placed it in front of me, the inside of my trunk lit by a harsh flash. For a second, my brain refused to process what I was seeing. Then the details clicked into place one by one. Opened cardboard boxes with shipping labels, a MacBook Pro still in its packaging, 2 iPads with Apple stickers, velvet jewelry cases spilling sparkles, a designer handbag with the logo front and center, a thick stack of credit cards bound together with a rubber band. Nothing of mine. Nothing that should have been there. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. What is all that stolen property?" he said simply. "These items match descriptions from at least 6 theft reports filed over the past 3 weeks. Residential burglaries in the West Hills package, thefts from apartment complexes, and a smash and grab at an electronics store." I stared at the photo until the shapes started to blur. "In my trunk." "In your trunk," he confirmed. "Which is why we need to be very clear on your timeline and movements over the last few weeks." He pulled out a notepad. "So," he continued, voice even, "you reported your car stolen 2 days ago. Your boyfriend's friend, Chris Nolan, had borrowed it to run errands and claimed it was taken from the Walmart on 5th. That's still your understanding of events?" "Yes." I heard how thin my voice sounded and forced it steady. "He had the car for a few hours on Wednesday. I was at work all day. I haven't used the trunk in, I don't know, at least a week before that. Maybe 2. I keep my gym bag in the back seat. I don't haul much around." "And before that," he asked, "any reason someone else would have access to your vehicle or keys, anyone who might have driven it besides you?" "Mark drives it sometimes," I said. "My boyfriend. But that's it. We don't loan it out." I let out a humorless breath. "Or we didn't until this." He jotted that down. "We'll need to verify your whereabouts for the dates and times of the thefts," he went on. "Do you typically work from home or on site?" "Hybrid," I said. 2, sometimes 3 days a week I'm at the office. Everything's logged. Badges, VPN, commits timesheets. Wednesdays and Fridays, I was definitely here." I tapped the table. "At work." He nodded like that matched something he already had. "And Ms. Vance," he asked, "what is your relationship to her?" I forced myself not to look away. "She's my boyfriend's ex-girlfriend. They dated for a couple of years in college. I've never met her in person, just heard stories." "Are you aware of any recent contact between them?" My chest tightened. It was the question I'd already asked Mark in my head a dozen times. "Not that he's told me," I said slowly. "As far as I know, they haven't spoken in years." He watched me for a moment like he was weighing the words, not just hearing them. "All right. We'll be interviewing Mr. Hayes and Mr. Nolan as well." He closed the folder. "For now, your vehicle is being held as evidence. Once the case progresses, we can discuss releasing it back to you, but I can't give you a specific timeline yet." I nodded numbly. "So I just don't have a car?" "I'm afraid not," he said, and there was a flicker of something human in his eyes, like he'd seen this scenario play out too many times. "You can give this to your insurance." He slid a card and a case number across the table. I hesitated. "Do you think I'm involved?" "If I thought you were involved, Miss Carter," he said evenly, "this conversation would look very different. Right now, you're a potential victim whose property has been used in the commission of multiple crimes. Our job is to verify your account and build a clear timeline." Victim. The word felt wrong. Victims were other people, blurry figures on the news. He stood. "We may need to speak again as the case develops. If you remember anything, anyone acting unusually interested in your car, missing keys, anything out of place, call me, no matter how small it seems." I left the station in a daze. The sky outside had turned that grayish-white that means it either just rained or is about to. I ordered an Uber and stood on the sidewalk hugging my arms around myself as cars hissed by on wet pavement. My car had been parked at Jessica's house. Her name echoed in my head, tied to every half-bitter, half-nostalgic story Mark had ever told. The girl who made him believe in big love and then walked away. The warning label he'd insisted he'd learned from. He hadn't mentioned seeing her. Not once in 3 years. So how did my car end up outside her house full of stolen goods? The Uber driver tried to make small talk. I nodded when appropriate. By the time we pulled up outside my apartment building, I had a knot of tension under my sternum that felt like it was going to crack my ribs. Mark was home when I walked in, pacing the living room with his phone in his hand. He looked up the moment the door opened. "Megan." Relief flooded his face, then quickly morphed into anxiety. What happened? Did they find it? Is it totaled? They found it, I said, closing the door quietly behind me. He blinked at my tone. Sit down. That bad, huh? Mark, I repeated, and there must have been something in my voice because he sank onto the couch without another word. I stayed standing, bag still on my shoulder keys, biting into my palm. They found my car parked on Maple Avenue, I said. Okay, that's good, he tried. I mean, at least outside a house owned by someone named Jessica Vance. His smile died mid-breath. For a moment, the room went dead silent. I watched the color drain from his face. He looked like someone had just punched him. Jessica, he said finally, voice barely above a whisper. You sure? The detective said her full name. He asked if it rang a bell. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. I told him, yes, that she's your ex. Mark swallowed, throat working. Megan, I swear to you, I have no idea. And when they opened the trunk, I continued talking over him now because if I stopped, I wasn't sure I'd be able to start again. It was full of stuff. Electronics, jewelry, packages with other people's names, credit cards, all stolen from burglaries and package thefts over the last few weeks. He stared at me, eyes wide. You're kidding. I wish I was. He ran a hand through his hair, fingers shaking. Okay, just slow down. Jessica's house. Are you sure Chris didn't? I am repeating exactly what the detective told me. My voice went sharp. My car was used to commit crimes. It was then parked outside your ex-girlfriend's house, and no one can tell me why. He shot to his feet like sitting still was suddenly impossible. I haven't talked to Jessica in years. You know that. I blocked her ages ago. Do I asked quietly. He stopped. The question hung between us like a third person. Of course you do, he said. But the words didn't have the same easy confidence they usually did. Megan, come on, you think I would hide something like that from you? I think, I said slowly, that my car is at her house, and I don't believe in coincidences that big. He swore under his breath and started pacing again. Chris. It has to be Chris. Maybe he knows someone who knows her, or... I cut in. Does Chris know Jessica? He froze. It was less than a second, just a flicker, but I saw it. The way his shoulders tensed, the way his eyes dropped to the floor before he caught himself. Mark, I said, my stomach dropping. Answer the question. He closed his eyes briefly, like bracing for impact. They went out a few times, years ago, after Jessica and I broke up. It wasn't serious. Did you think that was something I didn't need to know? My voice sharpened disbelief and anger twining together. I didn't think it mattered, he said quickly. It was before you, Meg. It was nothing. We all ran in the same circles back then. Does Chris know where she lives? I don't know, he said. Maybe. Probably. I'm not exactly on her Christmas card list. I stared at him, heartbeat thudding in my ears. So let me get this straight. You lent my car to your friend without asking me. That friend has at minimum a history with your ex, and now my car has been used for multiple crimes and abandoned outside her house. And you don't think any of that is relevant? His jaw clenched. I didn't know he was seeing her. I mean, I heard he ran into her a while back, but Chris said it was nothing, just coffee. I didn't want to make it a big thing. I thought if I brought it up with you, it would just sound like I was hung up on her still, and I'm not. I laughed once, a sharp, humorless sound. You didn't want drama, so instead you chose this. He stepped toward me, palms up like he was approaching something fragile. Megan, I swear I had no idea about the stolen stuff, about the house, any of it. I was just trying to help a friend. That's the problem, I said, feeling the first sting of tears at the corners of my eyes. You were so busy trying to help him that you didn't think about what you were risking for me. His face crumpled. That's not fair. Isn't it? I shot back. My name is on that title. My insurance. I'm the one they pulled into an interview room today, Mark. I'm the one whose trunk is on a crime scene photo. Not Chris. Not Jessica. Me. He reached for me, and I stepped back. Something flickered across his expression. Then hurt. Fear. Maybe shame. What did the detective say about you? That I'm a potential victim, I said bitterly. They're going to check my alibis, my logins, my work records. They'll call you. Chris. Probably Jessica. If they can get to her. They're building their case. He rubbed his hands over his face. Jesus. We argued for another hour, circling the same points until the words started to blur. He kept coming back to the same refrain I didn't know. I didn't think. I was just trying to help. And that was exactly the part that scared me the most. Because you don't have to mean harm to cause it. By the time the apartment went quiet, my head was pounding. I grabbed a pillow and blanket from the hall closet. "Where are you going?" Mark asked, voice hoarse. "The guest room," I said. "For how long?" "I don't know." I closed the door on his answer. Lying in the two firm guest beds, staring at the ceiling fan, spinning lazy circles, I replayed the day over and over. The photos on the table. Jessica's name. The hesitation in Mark's eyes. My life felt like a Jenga tower where someone had yanked a critical block from the bottom. Still technically standing, but one good jolt away from collapse. Somewhere in the apartment, I heard Mark moving around, cabinet doors opening and closing. The soft click of the bathroom light. A muffled curse. I used to find those domestic sounds comforting. Tonight, they just made me feel like there was a stranger in my home who happened to know where I kept the coffee filters. I tried to sleep. I failed. At some point in the thin, quiet hours between midnight and morning, I realized that whatever the police found next, my relationship had already crossed a line it couldn't uncross. Not because of Jessica, not because of Chris, but because when the fire started, the person holding the matches didn't even bother to check if I was standing in the same room. I didn't hear from Detective Miller the next morning, but I did hear from Mark. He knocked on the guest room door at 7:14 a.m. like he'd been staring at the clock, waiting for a socially acceptable time to try again. "Megan." His voice was tentative, thick with that groggy, apologetic tone people get after crying or not sleeping, or both. "Can we talk before work?" I stared at the ceiling for a long second, then swung my legs over the edge of the bed and opened the door. He looked rough. Eyes, red hair, sticking up on one side, still in his t-shirt, and sweats from the night before. He took one look at me, and his face softened the way it always did in moments like these when he was scared he'd actually lose me. "I'm sorry," he said before I could even speak. "About everything. I swear, Megan, I didn't know any of this would happen." I brushed past him into the kitchen. "That's the problem, Mark. You didn't know because you didn't think." He followed, rubbing the back of his neck. "Chris texted me late last night. He said he's freaking out, says he has no idea what Jessica was doing." "Did he admit he lied to the police about the Walmart story?" I asked, turning on the kettle with more force than necessary. Mark hesitated. He didn't say that exactly, which meant yes. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. At 10:42 a.m. While I was on a Zoom call reviewing API responses, my phone buzzed with an unknown number I instantly recognized anyway. "Hello, Miss Carter. It's Detective Miller. I have an update." I clicked mute on my meeting. "I'm listening." Chris Nolan came in this morning for questioning. After some time, he admitted he lied about the theft. He was not at the Walmart when your vehicle went missing. My stomach tightened. Then where was he? He says he gave the car to Miss Vance. A cold, sinking feeling swept through me. He what? He claims she told him she needed to move some items from a storage unit and that her own vehicle was unavailable. He maintains he didn't know she was using the car to commit crimes. "Do you believe him?" I asked. "We're still determining the full extent of his involvement," Miller said carefully. "At minimum, he is guilty of filing a false police report. More charges may follow depending on what we uncover." I pressed a hand to my forehead. "And Jessica?" He exhaled. "We executed a search warrant on her property this morning, found additional stolen items in her garage, electronics, jewelry, and packaging materials that match the inventory recovered from your vehicle." "So she's guilty?" "There is strong evidence pointing that direction. Yes." A pause. "Ms. Carter, do you have any knowledge of contact between Mr. Hayes and Ms. Vance in the past several weeks or months?" The question lodged like a thorn under my ribs. "No," I said. "Mark told me they haven't spoken in years. If that's not true, I don't know it." "I understand. We'll be interviewing him this afternoon." My pulse jumped. "Interviewing him?" "As a witness," he clarified. "Not a suspect." I didn't respond, not right away, because something inside me had already cracked. Something about the way Mark had paused last night before answering. Something about the way he'd said coffee instead of reconnected. Something about the way people lie by telling partial truths. "We'll stay in touch, Miss Carter," Miller said. "You'll receive updates as soon as there's more information." When we hung up, I stared at my reflection in the blank computer screen, eyes wide-mouthed, tight shoulders stiff, and realized I looked like someone bracing for an impact they couldn't see coming. That evening, Mark stood in the kitchen, staring at his phone like it had personally betrayed him. He looked up when I walked in. "Chris talked." "I know," I said. Miller called. Mark swallowed. "He gave the car to Jessica." "Yes, she told him she just needed to move furniture, that her car was in the shop." His voice shook. "Megan, I swear to you, I had no idea they were in contact." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "Are you sure?" He recoiled like I'd slapped him. "Yes, I would never lie to you about something like that." But the problem was, he already had. not in the dramatic soap opera sense. Not in infidelity or secret double lives, in smaller ways, omissions, minimizing. The kind of lies people tell themselves first, then others, because the truth is inconvenient. "Mark," I said quietly, "you told me Chris and Jessica weren't in contact." "That's what he said." His voice cracked. "He told me they ran into each other at a coffee shop weeks ago. One time, that was it." "Did he tell you before or after he borrowed my car?" His eyes dropped. "Before. So you already knew they'd reconnected." "I didn't think it was a big deal." His voice softened, pleading. "Megan, it was just coffee. I didn't want you to think I was hung up on her or jealous, and I didn't want to start something over nothing. So instead," I said, "you kept it from me." His hands dropped to his sides. "I didn't want drama." I laughed once short harsh. "Mark, the car was used for multiple felonies. We passed drama about 6 exits ago." He winced. We argued for another hour, not shouting exactly. More like 2 exhausted people trying to dig their way out of the same collapsed tunnel. Eventually, I retreated to the guest room again, the door clicking shut with the weight of everything we weren't saying. The story hit the local news on Saturday morning. Serial burglar arrested, stolen goods found in borrowed vehicle. They didn't name me, thank God, but they referred to the registered owner as an unsuspecting party with no connection to the crimes. My phone exploded. Co-workers, friends from college, my cousin in Seattle, even my old landlord. "Is that your car? You okay?" Saw the news. Holy crap. I didn't answer. I didn't even open most of them. Instead, I sat on the couch with a mug of tea that went cold in my hands and watched my own life play out on a screen, narrated by a reporter who had no idea how close I'd come to being dragged into the charges. At noon, my phone rang with Chris's name. I stared at the screen for 3 rings, then picked up. "Megan," he said immediately. His voice was wrecked. "Megan, please, I'm so sorry. I didn't know what Jessica was doing. I thought she was just moving furniture. You have to believe me." "Why?" I asked, my voice flat. "Why should I believe a single word you say? You lied to the police. You lied to Mark. You took my car without my permission. You gave it to someone who used it to commit felonies." "I didn't know," he insisted. "If I had known..." "That's the problem, Chris. You never know. You just act. You don't think. And now look what it cost." He made a wounded sound. "Megan, please. How long have you and Jessica been seeing each other again?" Silence. Just the faint sound of him breathing. "Chris." 2 months?" he whispered. "Maybe a little more." I closed my eyes. "And you didn't tell Mark. He would have freaked out, right? So instead you dragged both of us into this mess." "I didn't mean... I don't care what you meant." I hung up, blocked his number. For the first time since the car disappeared, I felt something sharp and grounding. Anger. Real anger. Not panic, not fear, not exhaustion. Just clean, simple fury at the way people like Chris move through the world, careless, oblivious, protected by their own intentions while everyone else paid the cost. Detective Miller called again on Tuesday afternoon. I stepped out onto the balcony to take it. The air was cold enough to sting my cheeks. "Miss Carter," he said, "I wanted to update you. We formally charged Ms. Vance with 6 counts of burglary, multiple counts of theft, possession of stolen property, and trafficking in stolen goods." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "And Chris, he has agreed to cooperate fully," Miller said, in exchange for reduced charges. "He'll likely plead guilty to misdemeanor accessory after the fact. Probation, maybe community service. No jail time. So he gets to walk," I said bitterly. "He's cooperating," Miller reminded me. "That carries weight with the DA." I stared out at the gray city skyline. "And me?" "You are completely clear," he said. "Your alibi checked out for every relevant date. Your digital records were consistent. You're a victim in this case. Nothing more." Nothing more. I thanked him, hung up, and leaned on the railing until my fingers went numb. When I finally went inside, Mark was waiting at the kitchen island, eyes searching mine. "What did he say?" I sat down across from him. "It's done. Jessica has been charged. Chris is cooperating. I'm cleared." His shoulders sagged in relief. Thank God. But I didn't feel relief. I felt empty. "I think we need to talk," I said softly. Mark's breath stuttered. "Megan, we can't keep doing this," I said. "This kind of disaster doesn't come out of nowhere. It comes from patterns. And your patterns..." My voice broke. "Your patterns put me in danger." "It was a mistake," he whispered. "A horrible mistake. One you've made before." I looked at him carefully. "You always assume things will probably be fine, that people are good, that consequences are for later, and every time I'm the one who ends up carrying the fallout." He closed his eyes like the words physically hurt him. "I love you," he said. "I know. I whispered. "But loving me isn't the same as protecting me." Silence thickened between us. "I don't think we can fix this," I said finally. He bowed his head, shoulders shaking once. "Barely, but enough." "Okay," he said, voice raw, "if that's what you need." It wasn't what I needed. It was what I couldn't avoid anymore. "Maybe someday we'll look back on this and understand it better," I said. "But right now, the trust is broken." He nodded without looking up. We didn't fight. We just ended. Quietly. Tragically. Inevitably. And that night, when I returned to the guest room, I realized the bed didn't feel too firm anymore. It felt like the first safe place I'd been in days. Mark moved out on a Wednesday, not with shouting or slammed doors or accusations flung like knives, just two people sitting across from each other in a quiet apartment they once called home, dividing up the life they'd woven together. "I can take the air fryer," he said weakly, trying for normalcy as he wrapped the cord around it. "You don't even cook," I reminded him softly. He gave a small, sad shrug. "I make frozen wings." "Then take it." It went on like that for hours. Calm, strange, heavy. A softness that didn't match the severity of what we were unraveling. When he was done, he zipped up the last duffel bag and stood in the doorway. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "for everything. For not thinking. For dragging you into this. For not being what you needed." I swallowed. "Mark." He shook his head gently. "You don't have to say it. I know." He stepped closer, lifted his hand, then hesitated like he wasn't sure if he was allowed to touch me. In the end, he didn't. His hand dropped to his side. "I don't think I'll ever forgive myself," he said. "You don't have to spend the rest of your life punishing yourself," I whispered. "Just learn from it." A weak, sad smile tugged at his mouth. "You always were better at the lessons than I was." He took a step back. "Can you text me when the utilities come through so we can close them out?" "I will." "Okay." He nodded once tightly. "Goodbye, Megan." And just like that, he walked out. I didn't cry until the door clicked shut. 3 weeks later, I received an email from Detective Miller. Subject: Case Update People v. Vance. I clicked it open with a pulse of dread. Jessica Vance has accepted a plea deal. 3 years state incarceration, restitution to victims, seized property, forfeited as evidence. Chris Nolan has pleaded guilty to misdemeanor accessory after the fact, sentenced to 2 years probation and 200 hours of community service. I stared at the screen long after finishing, letting the words settle like dust. There was no vindication, no satisfaction, just a quiet finality, the way a book snapped shut. I forwarded the email to my personal folder, archived the thread, and closed my laptop. Getting my car back took another 2 weeks. I stood outside the impound lot, breath fogging in the cold air, while an attendant with a clipboard walked me over to the familiar blue Camry. My Camry, but not the same one I'd handed keys over for 3 weeks prior. I opened the driver's door, and even though it was empty, sanitized and vacuumed, I felt sick. The trunk felt heavier than metal should. I didn't open it. "Do you want to check for personal items?" the attendant asked. "No," I said quickly. "I'm good." On the drive home, every sound made me jump. Every brake light ahead of me felt like a warning flare. By the time I pulled into my apartment garage, my forehead was damp with cold sweat. The next morning, I scheduled a detailing appointment, then another one, then another, because the second didn't feel like enough. Some stains are invisible, but still there. People kept asking me why Mark and I really broke up. My coworker Sarah cornered me near the elevators. "He seemed so sweet," she said. "You guys were so good together." "We weren't as good as we looked," I said simply. She frowned. "Did he cheat?" "No." "Then what happened?" I could have explained. I could have drawn diagrams, shown texts, offered timelines. But the truth was both simple and impossible to summarize. "He made a mistake," I said, and I realized it wasn't the first time. "But it was the biggest," she guessed. "Yeah," I murmured. "Big enough to show me everything else." Then came the comments from well-meaning friends and family. "You can't throw away a relationship over one bad decision. He didn't mean to hurt you. You're being too hard on him." But they weren't there in that police interview room. They didn't see the photos of my trunk packed with stolen property worth more than my annual rent. They didn't lie awake for nights wondering if a prosecutor might drag me into a courtroom because of someone else's choices. They didn't see the fault lines hidden under the surface until the earthquake hit. I stopped explaining myself. Some people would never understand that neglect can be as dangerous as malice, just slower, quieter, and harder to recognize until it's too late. 2 months later, I found myself in therapy for the first time in my life. "I'm not here because I'm heartbroken," I told my therapist in our second session. "I'm here because I don't trust my own judgment anymore." She nodded, legs folded, notebook balanced on her knee. "Tell me more." I thought I knew who Mark was. I said. Thought I knew what he was capable of. Thought I understood the people he surrounded himself with, and now I keep looking at every choice I made in that relationship and wondering if I ignored signs because it was easier to believe everything was fine. She leaned forward slightly. It's not unusual to doubt yourself after a traumatic event that involved someone close to you, but the fact that you made hard decisions, even painful ones, to protect yourself, that's not distrust. That's clarity. I stared at the carpet, letting her words sift through me. Clarity. Maybe that's what this whole nightmare really was, a brutal, unwanted lesson in clarity. I changed my locks the same week Mark moved out. My therapist said it was a boundary exercise. My best friend, Jessica, different. Jessica, not the felonious one, said it was overdue. Never give someone access to your space if they won't protect it. She wasn't wrong. I stopped loaning anything out. Not cars, not chargers, not sweaters, not emotional bandwidth. Too many people treated boundaries like suggestions. The car is fine now, normal. Technically clean, functional. But every time I open the trunk to load groceries or gym gear, I get a tiny flash of that photo, the one the detective slid across the cold metal table. The jewelry, the credit cards, the apple boxes, the neat rows of stolen things that had nothing to do with me but were carried in something that belonged to me. We often talk about betrayal in big explosive terms, affairs, secret families, stolen money. But there is a quieter, more insidious form of betrayal called weaponized incompetence. It's when someone you love hides behind the phrase, "I didn't think," to absolve themselves of the damage they caused. Mark didn't mean to get my car involved in a felony ring. He didn't mean to put me in danger. But his refusal to ask for permission to vet his friends to consider my boundaries was a choice. And that choice had consequences that I ended up paying for. If you are the person in your relationship who is always double-checking the locks, always carrying the mental load, always cleaning up the messes that the other person didn't mean to make pay attention. Negligence is not cute. It is not a quirk. It is a liability. You deserve a partner who treats your safety and your property with the same respect they treat their own. You deserve someone who thinks before they act because they know their actions affect you. Don't let "I didn't know" be a valid excuse for setting your life on fire. Sometimes the hardest thing isn't leaving the person who hurt you on purpose. It's leaving the person who hurt you by accident over and over again because they never cared enough to be careful. Thank you for listening to Megan Carter's story. Until next time, keep your boundaries high and your keys close.